Welcome to The Impact Equation, conversations with leaders shaping a brighter future, with me, Adam Pike.
And me, Rafi Adelstone. With our special guests, we unlock the secrets of those who dare to transform our world. We talk to architects of change, pioneers in their fields, working towards a brighter future for us all. In each episode, we dig into each element of the impact equation. Today's guest is someone who's made an enormous contribution across charity and civil society in the UK, Dame Dr Helen Stephenson. Helen was until recently the Chief Executive of the Charity Commission, where she led the regulation of over 169,000 charities. She's held senior roles across government, from the Department for Education to the Cabinet Office, as Director of Early Years and Childcare and as Director of the Office for Civil Society and the Government's Innovation Group, supporting innovation in and outside of government.
Helen has also brought her expertise to major institutions like the National Lottery Community Fund and the Royal Academy of Dance. Dame Dr Helen is a doctor with a PhD in philosophy, awarded a CBE in 2014 and made a Dame in the 2024 birthday honours. Helen's work has left an indelible mark on public life. Helen, welcome to The Impact Equation. It's an honour to have you with us.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. So Helen, we'll start where we normally do. So if you give us a bit of a sense of your background and your early life that drove you into the career that you followed, really with a commitment to impact.
So my father was in the customs, which meant that we travelled around a little bit when I was younger. I was the eldest of three children, although I've got an older half brother as well. And we ended up, when I was about 5, in Kent, in the most idyllic village, living by the sea in a lovely house. My father was in the customs there. And, I probably loved village life. It was a great start, I guess. And really, a wonderful, textbook start to life until I was 12, really, 12 and a half, when we went on holiday to Holland. And my mum died while we were away. She had cancer and died very suddenly.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
We knew she was ill, but we never knew really how ill she was. And I guess in those days, you didn't really used to involve children in anything like that. So the best way was to keep children out of it all. So we didn't go to the funeral. We didn't really talk about it. And I think that kind of trauma, if you like, probably has really shaped me. It shaped me as a person. It shaped me as a worker. It shaped me as a mother, as a partner, as an employee, later as a leader and a chief executive. But I'd never really thought about how it probably shaped the choices that I made as well. And I think, and it's probably since you asked me the question, I've been thinking about it. And I thought, well, maybe, unconsciously, because obviously I was too young, but unconsciously, I think there was a sense for me as there has to be a purpose. There's got to be a reason. There has to be something that matters. My life has to count because I know it could be very short. Now, all of that is me working that out as I've got as an adult. But I think it really kind of at a deep level was something that affected me, obviously, but also made me think what I do, who I am, has to count somehow. And I think that's probably the kind of basis for the kind of career path that followed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Helen. I'm very sorry to hear that. It must have been unimaginable, especially considering your siblings and situation, being abroad and everything. Mm. Can you talk us through sort of your teenage years then? So, in response to that, like how did you sort of cope? How did you, help with the rest of the family? And how did that then guide you in terms of your education and then into sort of into the workforce?
So we moved house pretty quickly after my mum died, and that meant we moved school, we moved friendship group, again, not ideal. So I would say, I don't think I had I wasn't like caring for my siblings. I wouldn't like to paint myself in that position, but I certainly took more responsibility at a younger age than my friends or peers did. And I think that I had a very normal, I had a lesson, well, no, it wasn't normal, but I had a very kind of normal, I went out, I had friends, I had, boyfriends, etc., etc. So it was all as you would expect from a teenager, but it also had with it a sense of responsibility and concern for others, I guess. which I had from a very young age. And I think if I look at my working life all the way through, I can see that kind of sense of responsibility probably made me quite a good employee. And I think if I think about why I've been successful in my career, I think that probably that early drive really connected it, really. So yeah, adolescence, went to school, got they were O levels then and A levels, and then I went to university. And I went to university in London, and I studied English and drama, which is something I was passionate about. I still love it, and had a great time at university. And I think it was at the end of university that probably where the next choice came, which was what am I going to do next. And I've been on a drama degree, and I had a number of things that I could do. I was looking into working on as a kind of producer on the BBC. They do this training course that you can go on. I was looking at world service, working for the World Service, and I was also thinking about being a drama and movement therapist, which is using drama and movement as a way of communicating, as a way of engaging people who perhaps find it more difficult to engage, through writing or kind of, the workforce. And it was at that point where I decided, I was going to go down the drama therapy route. And I went and trained as a drama and movement therapist. And I guess that was probably the point at which I made a conscious choice to follow a more of an impact career.
Wow, I was thinking, Dame Helen, that there's another Dame Helen Mirren. So if your career path took a different turn... I'm not going to compare
myself in any way with Dame Helen. I think...
I'm interested in where the path left. And so how did you find yourself going from that qualification, the experience in drama therapy, into sort of the first steps into, I guess... Not the civil service, actually. There was a step prior to that, I think, in civil society.
Yeah, and I think when you look at my career path, it's not a very classic one. It's kind of moving from different things. Now, all of them make sense to me, and all of them kind of build on each other. And I can draw a line. There's a golden thread that goes through it. But when I finished my course, I worked a bit I did some voluntary work with young people. But I then went and worked. And at the time, there was the statutory sector didn't do drama therapy, so there wasn't really, and certainly the commercial sector didn't. It's much more of a thing now. But the only real people who were engaged in drama and movement therapy was the voluntary sector, civil society, and so I was lucky enough to work in a job share with a small organisation called Reach, which provided drama movement sessions to a range of people with learning difficulties, people with mental health problems, people who were in long stay, elderly care hospitals. So a real range of people, and developing ways in which you can use the kind of medium of drama and movement to enrich, encourage communication, build self-confidence, build community, and get a group work. All of that was my step really into the civil society space.
I'm interested in where your PhD in philosophy came then, because that sounds like a natural progression from drama therapy to philosophy.
I told you it was a bit convoluted.
No, it's not convoluted the slightest. It's fabulous.
So from my drama movement work, I went to work into action research in the health service. And that was about finding ways in which you could involve consumers, users, patients with their healthcare. And that was the beginning of that whole movement of kind of empowerment for patients and consumers and users. And from that, that was an action research program. I did a master's in social research following on from that, and then was offered the opportunity to go to Bristol University. And it's probably one of those moments of serendipity, really. And I guess a lot of people have got those in their career where two things connect and enable you to take quite a shift in what you're doing. So having done my master's, I was quite interested in the kind of role of gender difference. And I spoke to a professor there, and she was a professor of theology actually at Bristol. And she wanted a kind of social study into the first group of women who were ordained into the Church of England. And so I ended up doing this research and looking at backgrounds, experiences, and attitudes of that first group of women, on the basis that this was probably the first profession which saw a group of women come into it in significant numbers. And I was looking really as to whether there was any evidence or any suggestion that they might do things differently from what was traditionally seen as a male way of operating, and seeing whether that was going to, as a result, change the church. So I didn't then follow up with the study, but the study was pretty seminal at the time, in the sense that it was probably, I think, the only one that's been done into that whole cohort of women who came into that profession at one time.
Amazing. You alluded to, Helen, the golden thread through your career. So stepping back and looking at the arc of your career, which has touched on education policy, charity regulation, innovation from within and outside of government, as well as, sort of, as you say, that cohort research. What is that thread that connects the roles that you've taken on?
I think there's two. I think there's me personally, and there's what holds it all together from a kind of coherence in terms of what it, as you say, the narrative, if you like. For me personally, it's always been about things that I feel are taking me to another step, to another stage, growing as a person, growing as a leader, growing as in my career. But in terms of the narrative arc, if you like, it's always been about impact and change. So in the health service, it was about how do we change the health service to be based around the needs and wants of the people who use it, rather than around the professionalisation or medicalisation of healthcare. So with the PhD, it was about what does this research tell the church and society about how you treat women in the workplace, and what does the church, what does society need to learn from the experiences of that group of women at that particular time. And I think that, to me, if you look at everything that I've done, it's been around change and innovation in the social space.
And would you say on that journey, has there been anybody that you've particularly been inspired by, or mentors, or people you've looked up to as you sort of gone through your career?
Oh gosh, I would say there's an army. I think there's a phrase, isn't it? You stand on the shoulder of giants. And I would say that each stage there have been people who I have felt I've learned from, and I have been enriched by working alongside or with. So when I was working with Reach, I worked with somebody who became a very close friend of mine, then Sheila, who was a brilliant therapist. And I learned a lot about the therapeutic side of that from her. Working with Professor Ursula King at Bristol, it was just mind blowing, working with one of the first female chairs at Bristol Uni. Working in the civil service, then I met some amazing people. And I don't know, the civil service has got bad reputation these days, isn't it? But I think I've worked with some of the best people that I've ever worked with in the civil service, the brightest, the most engaged, the most committed. And, I could name after name of people who I really rate in terms of what they contribute to our society.
Most recently, you were chief executive of the Charity Commission, which is an enormous responsibility. It has absolutely public profile and is under scrutiny. I wanted to just ask you, looking at the charity sector, what do you reflect on as being the best parts, and what are its worst parts?
So one of the things that surprised me, and I don't know why I was surprised about this, when I went to the Charity Commission, having spent a lot of my career in and around the voluntary charity sector, social enterprise sector, was how much bad stuff came across my desk. But when you think about it, the regulator was there to deal with the bad stuff, if you like, in order that the good stuff that the sector contributes can thrive and grow and develop. So proportionally, compared to the amount of social action, volunteering, donations, we dealt with a relatively small proportion of that, in terms of it having gone wrong in the charity sector. But nevertheless, it came across my desk. That's what really came across my desk all of the 7 years that I was there. So, in terms of what I think is brilliant about the charity sector and the best about it, is I think it has the ability to work in ways that neither the private sector or the public sector can, by focusing and building around individual wants and needs and creating services that meet the needs of individuals rather than meet the needs of the kind of monolithical public sector or the kind of more market driven private sector. And when it's at its best, it uses innovative social methods to really reach and deal with social issues. Now, one example of this is a charity called Red Thread, and I'm now on the board of two really fantastic hospitals in London, and one of them has a major trauma centre, and they have a partnership with Red Thread. This trauma centre sees about, I think, a quarter of the trauma it sees is knife related. And what they do is at the point at which that individual is brought into the trauma centre, it connects up with Red Thread, and Red Thread are able to work holistically with that individual. You know, the acute sector is there to support the medical needs, but Red Thread is there to work with that individual to try and use that traumatic moment to get that individual away from the circumstances that have caused them to be in the trauma section at that time. And that example of social innovation and working alongside other sectors to deliver for individuals in a way that meets the need of that individual, I think is fantastic, and is the kind of thing that I love about the voluntary charity and social enterprise sector. What I don't like about it is when it has it doesn't collaborate with itself, when it doesn't focus on the mission that it has as of the sector and actually work together, and put aside sometimes ambition or whatever in order to work on behalf of the people they're there to serve. And I would love to see much more collaboration and joining up of organisations and individuals to achieve more social impact going forward.
That really resonates with me, to focus professionally on partnerships and the idea of offering a holistic response to complex challenges and having the space and time to be able to think differently than statutory services or private sector enabled services that have different incentives, I think is really important. I think other components of the charity sector, I imagine that you saw across your desk, sort of the advocacy side, I imagine that maybe brought some challenges, sort of research and policy side as well. How else, when you're thinking back on your time at the Charities Commission, what else stands out for you as sort of highlights of your time or things that, cause you to reflect on our system today?
So I think there were a number of challenges over that period, and a number of kind of very high profile charity issues that people will remember. Oxfam was one, Captain Tom, all of those really seminal in the sense that they affected the way people saw the sector as a whole, and therefore for the regulator it was really important that we responded to it fairly but robustly. And so those big moments would always be in my mind as I look back on those 7 years. But also, I think I worked on the basis that as a regulator, you've got two things to do. You've got to support people to try and get it right, to improve their governance, to improve their, to make sure that they then, if you like, don't go down, make mistakes and then make serious mistakes and then go badly wrong. So you support people to get it right. And I was proud of the work that we did to support trustees and the development that we did there. But at the same time, when things do go wrong, it was important that we used the powers that government had given us to deal with that robustly, because I think it's that robust that gives people confidence that they can give their time and their money to these organisations that are so rich in our society. So I think it was, for me, getting the balance of those two things was really important. And then building a really great team to deliver that together, I think, was the other bit that I remember and will take away from that experience.
And Helen, obviously there's been much made about changes in the tax system increases in employers' NI and such. But I'm interested in if there are any legislative changes that you think the government could do that would really support and encourage the charitable sector.
I think the real changes that I would like to see is how do we formalise in a better way that partnership that we were talking about earlier? What is it that government can do to facilitate that partnership rather than, halfway down the line, remember they perhaps want to consult or talk to the charity sector about things? I'd love to find ways in which that can be more of a grown up and mature relationship. It seems to ebb and flow, and I think it's something that the sector is challenged by. And I don't know that there's ever been a way in which that's happened effectively. So I'd love to see more of that, both partnerships with government, partnerships at a local level with local authorities and other players, but also with business.
That's fantastic. Music to my ears. I imagine that the best way you would do that is around some sort of focused theme, whether that's a challenge area or a region through devolution or through a sort of capability. Are there mechanisms that exist like that today? You sort of said, it's implied that there aren't. Like, there must be some models that we can build on to sort of deliver it.
There's lots of models that have come and gone over my time connected to it all. What's interesting is in Wales, there is a statutory requirement for, and I forget the actual framework, but there's a statutory requirement for each local authority to have a third sector plan or kind of approach. So it doesn't come necessarily with any money, but it is in statute that there has to be a relationship between the local area and the voluntary sector. And what I've observed, and because the Charity Commission was for England and Wales, what I've observed over time is that has protected, even when money has been scarce or we've been in the middle of COVID pandemic, that has protected and strengthened the relationship between the voluntary sector and the government. It's easier to do that in Wales because it's a smaller country. It's not as easy to prescribe that in England as a whole because it is this, it's much more diverse and much bigger. But I do think there should be ways in which investing in that local collaboration and partnership, and probably that does need to come with some funding associated with it. But that to me is the key bit where all of the sectors need to come together, and particularly not just the voluntary sector and local authority, but I really, some of the best things I've done have been around partnerships with the private sector. And I really still feel we've not got that and tapped that in a way that we should do in order to see social change.
I would love to hear about those examples, what you're thinking of when you're thinking of the collaborations you built.
So I worked in the Cabinet Office through the Big Society year, and I think I was once categorised as the person who's responsible for it. But there was so many really impactful things that happened during that period. And I think on reflection, I think it was because we were in a coalition government, if you remember, and the government set out its plan at the beginning of the coalition and basically couldn't change it because it needed both sides to be able to change. So we had a very stable period to deliver. And we delivered loads during that time. I think you've already touched on what was Big Society Capital until just recently. Independent endowments, community organisers, national citizen services, so many brilliant ideas. But one of them was this thing called business connectors. And it was just looking at ways in which we could get local businesses or even national businesses to second and engage some of their staff into that kind of capacity building work at a local level. And when I was in the Cabinet Office, we put some money into that, and I think then the big lottery put some money in, and business in the community, and for a number of years, has some really positive engagement at local levels with key people from the business sector who were building collaborations with local voluntary groups. And that was just one example of it. But I think there's so much that could be done, because I really believe that, businesses want to keep their, to attract, they want to deliver social impact as well as delivering financial return. And some of the ways to engage in keep their workforce engaged is through this kind of engagement with the voluntary and social sector.
That's absolutely right, especially in the sort of context of transition and there needing to be, a holistic approach to sort of tackling some of the very complex problems we face, both sustainability and social impact inequality. I'm reading at the moment Sam Freeman's Failed State, and he talks all about, the hollowing out of local capacity and local capability over the last sort of 20, 30 years. I think that's a massive barrier. But in the converse, I'm working with the social investment business right now on their strategy. And, what they're doing, what Nick Temple and the team are doing there is they've really created a fail-safe mechanism for deploying money out into the world in a way that, is manageable and trackable. And I think what we're thinking about together with them is how to do that by building up local capability, how to do that by sort of creating as a local impact around different themes that are relevant to the local space. And I think there's definitely a huge opportunity to do exactly what you're calling for. It's a matter of just pulling the right people together in the system to do that.
And it's about having key people it's about relationships and key people who get it and will put the extra mile into building the relationship, making sure that when the pressure's on, that you keep that live, that you don't let it disappear too quickly.
Do you think that some mayors might be an important unlocker of that? Could that be a sort of route to local action, a systemic way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know lots about the mayors. I haven't worked in that space particularly, but it feels like it should do. It really does, because it brings a convening power that I think is often really necessary. And I think that's where, when we've been working in government, that's been one of the things that government can do, which is convene and bring together. And I think the mayors can really do that successfully at a local level.
We talk about collaboration, but again, the intention is to create lasting change. And so, Helen, I'm really interested in your reflections on that topic. So across the roles in Cabinet Office, the DfE, the Big Lottery Fund, what have you seen that's been most effective when it comes to creating real lasting change?
Well, that's a really good question. I think there's a sweet spot of government or political leadership chiming with social need and bringing in strong partnerships. I think those three things have probably created some of the most effective things that I've been involved in. I think I look back at, involved in the lottery now, and we're doing some brilliant things. For instance, we're working on something called the Climate Action Fund, which is, using the power, the kind of leverage, if you like, of the scale of the National Lottery Community Fund to really look for a sea change in the way communities are able to respond to the climate crisis. And I think that's a good example of the kind of the need, the political will, if you like, giving us the policy directions to do that, and then the partnerships that are delivering it. But also, earlier on when the lottery was the New Opportunities Fund, which was way back in, I think, the 2000s, early 2000s, we funded some pretty game-changing activity at that time. In fact, all of the childcare expansion came initially from the lottery. All of the computers in libraries came from the lottery. And I look at those things, I think, good, yeah. If you're a lottery player, you can point to certain things. You may not know that that's where it came from, but that money was used to achieve real change in communities, which you can still see today.
I love the idea of sort of big lottery seeding new innovations that then gives way to government properly funding and legislating for those changes. Across your career, Helen, are there any examples of people that have been particularly effective at driving through change? And what was it about them that enabled them to do that? What were the kind of characteristics that they might have had?
So there's an amazing woman called Dame Julia Cleverden, who is currently chair of National Lottery, but I've worked with over the years in various different roles. And she is just a force of nature. And you try and say no to Julia. And Julia has been going every couple of months to Blackpool to bring together different parts of the public-private sector in Blackpool to try and effect change in really, in that area where lots and lots of other funders are, putting money into it. But what she recognised was that you absolutely need to get people together and get them working together. You can't just pour money in your silo. You have to get people working together to address the real change that is needed in places and areas. And I think she would be an example of somebody who is, absolutely her career is littered with developments and changes that have happened as a result of her kind of just forcefully continuing to push forward some of those ideas. There's been some other great leaders that I see. I see people like Matt Hyde, who was at the Scouts, is now at Lloyds Bank Foundation, set up Big Help Out with other people. You see social entrepreneurs who set up businesses. I've just seen so many, if you like, looking at Eden and what that's become. Tim Smith set that up, and just how somebody has the vision to do something extraordinary that you could never, who thought of it, to build some glass domes in some disused pits in Cornwall. Where on earth did you see? So it's just that kind of vision and passion and drive that I think I've seen so much of it, and I'm in awe of it.
I think you've given us an idea for the Impact Equation Summer Festival, quite frankly, there, Helen. We'll have to go down there. So, Helen, in a recent speech, you reflected on 7 lessons you learned about the charity sector. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of themes, if that's okay, to unpack. And the first was you described trusteeship as one of the most important forms of civic action, yet so often is unseen and unsung. I guess, what would it take for us to elevate the role of trustees in society and encourage more people to take on that responsibility?
So I think there's 2 parts to this. So in many ways, there are people who are very keen to be trustees, and I think some of the bigger charities, they're very competitive roles. So people coming to the end of their private sector career often want to go and give back in those kinds of roles. Where I think the growth could be, and I think you're both working in that space, which is about how do you connect up people who are earlier in their careers with trusteeship, because I firmly believe that trusteeship offers as much as to you as an individual as you give to that organisation. And so for somebody early in their career, you've got chance to be involved in management, be involved in business planning, strategy setting, people management, and opportunities that you may not get in your actual job. So it's how do we explain it, how do we sell it, if you like? How do we create those partnerships that make sure at scale that make sure that people earlier in their career can give back, if you like, through trusteeship, but at the same time get a lot, which will then feed back and kind of create impact into the organisations that they work for. And I think that's a bit about businesses being able to create those partnerships at scale to get businesses to promote it with their workforce, but also getting the charities and the voluntary organisations to not to rely on people who are retired to give their time, but to get busy people who perhaps have got full-time jobs and families. How do you get them to give enough time to be able to run the organisation? So I think on both sides, both as the employer and as the charity, there needs to be that kind of moving towards each other to create a synergy that would allow more people to come through into volunteering in that way.
Another thing that you brought up in that speech was also the scrutiny that leaders in the charity and third sector and also the public sector face. How do you reflect on that? Have you seen examples of that going too far in your career to date? How do you think we should be thinking about holding our leaders to account in a proper way?
So I think in some ways it comes with the territory. So chief executive of the Charity Commission, a couple of times I was the result of some not particularly nice feedback in the media. So recognising that a bit of it comes with the territory. I think when it comes to how do you engage with that as an individual, I think for me the key thing here is that you have to stay driven by your values and purpose. And if you do, then whatever comes your way, you know that you've dealt with integrity and with purpose, and therefore I feel that will guard you, if you like, through the more difficult times. I think I've gone back a bit to the civil service values actually there, and they're pretty good actually. That if you live by them, I think you may still be criticised, you may still come under intense scrutiny, but in terms of integrity, honesty, objectivity, impartiality, they're pretty good to abide by. And I think it's that having that sense of purpose and mission and value that will protect you as an individual when you are in those roles. And at the same time, I think recognizing that does come a bit with the territory, but also then for those of us that have an opportunity to call it out as being disproportionate or unfair, then I think it's upon, there's a duty on us to do that too. So those three things, I think, start to create an answer to that question.
I think unfortunately we've come to the end of our time, Dame Helen, but I think there's one other topic I wanted to cover. I think it's been a bit of a discussion about C's. So we talked about charities, we talked about collaboration, just talked about childcare. There's another C I wanted to raise with you, which is cricket. So I spotted that you're on the board of this ECB regulation. Can you just explain a little bit about that and what's your sort of cricket?
My cricket heritage.
Yeah,
it sounds like Rafi's trying to fish for tickets here.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, good luck. That's the other thing about being a regulator. You're obviously not in position to do anything but undermine your regulatory involvement. So when I finished at the Charity Commission, I really thought long and hard about what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do another full-time job, but I also wanted to stay engaged and involved in things that I cared about, I'm interested in, or I'm passionate about. So I'm not a cricket aficionado. I don't know a lot about cricket. I'm learning more. I do know about regulation. And going back to my early years, my father loved it. And I grew up watching him play cricket and also him watching the test match. So although I haven't followed it, I'm very fond of it as a sport and therefore wanted to get more involved and also to contribute, I hope, my kind of regulatory expertise to cricket. I'm also, as I said, sitting on the boards of two big acute hospitals, working with the National Lottery Community Fund on their board and working a bit with the Royal Academy of Dance. And then finally I'm a trustee in the King's Foundation, which is one of the King's charities. So, which is looking at traditional arts and place-based sustainability, places, people and planet. So a lot of things that are very diverse, very interesting. I care about them and I'm interested in what I'm doing. So I'm living the life, really.
Good for you.
Amazing. Well, Dame Helen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to understand more about your background and your career and areas of impact. And those multiple different boards are clearly very fortunate to have you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you. It's been great just to reflect a bit on my career and what has been driving me all these years.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Rafi, what are your reflections on Dame Dr. Helen?
I absolutely love that conversation. I'm so in awe of what Helen has achieved in her career and the number of roles that she's taken on at such a high level, all of which has been with a sort of pursuit of system change, exactly the conversations that we want to be having through this podcast, and really in line with my thinking in terms of what we need, which is collaboration, which is partnership, which is about bringing different parts of the system together in order to solve complex problems at scale. That's what she's talking about. That's what she's calling for. That's what she's saying we need. And I completely agree. And it's really validating to hear that from someone with her experience and her background, just being able to make that point. Is fantastic. I love to hear some of the sort of stories and the people she referred to. Obviously, again, another important feature of what we do in this podcast, the sort of personal stories so affecting, this idea that, she had this tragedy as a young girl and that has really driven her through her career. I think, you find that in lots of very senior people, they're sort of driven by, I think Alistair Campbell's book on leadership sort of talks about how leaders are often driven by that sort of foundational traumatic story that led them. I mean, clearly there's something about that here as well, which we're sort of finding as a feature of some of the people we're talking to. I loved it. Thank you so much for bringing her on. Amazing.
No, it's great. I mean, a couple of things I think I couldn't have put it better myself, Rafi, was a lesson there around not being too intentional about your career choices and letting the choices find you. And I love the fact that we went from English and drama at university to drama therapy to a doctorate in philosophy through to civic society, then into capitalist and charity, covering both innovation briefs but also regulation briefs, which often aren't too appropriate bedfellows.
How much do you think that is possible today? I think however many years ago, where it maybe feels like less competitive. Also, society at large, the sort of economy was growing. There's more of a sense of opportunity. Innovation was in a different phase. And now innovation is like very, rooted to technology and digital, where in these kinds of meandering careers may be much more difficult.
To my mind, often we talk about sort of CV points. So we try and build a CV, but we forget about the life CV. What do you want to be known for? And actually, if you follow your passion, provided that passion can help you earn a living, and you don't care about answering the question, well, what do you do on the basis of what you think people want to hear, but what matters to you? I think increasingly as I get a bit older and trying to associate less with career achievement and more about what I want to achieve personally, I think is much more important.
I think that links to what she said about trusteeship, right? Which is, a really great message that people should take the opportunity of engaging with charities as a volunteer to build those characteristics, those personal characteristics, those
100%.
What's David Brooks's thing? Eulogy characteristics or whatever outside of traditional.
Correct. And the other thing is, again, we come back to this thing, which I wonder whether we should do a number of sessions on exploring partnerships that solve complex problems. Actually, whether there might be a forum to bring together different people from different walks of life, focusing on some of the issues that have arisen in this conversation, because it's critical. We've worked in careers and we've had people on where collaboration and partnership is a consistent theme in the way that people deliver service, from Nehal working in partnership with local governments in India, Brett having the support of different political parties and others. I think that is something that we ought to investigate and explore further together.
Sounds like a great idea. All right, Adam. Well, thank you to Dame Helen. Thanks to you. And until next time on The Impact Equation.